Tante, papastim tzikasun. So hello and welcome back. So today we're going to finish processing our Kagumna Kasimagak, our Devil's Club. We've gone out to the woods, we gave our protocol, and we've picked the medicine, and now we've brought it back. So with Kagumna Kasimagak, when we process it, there's a few things we need. We need some nice thick leather gloves, because of course the Devil's Club is full of these very, very prickly spines, thorns on them. And the thing with the thorns on these, if you happen to get any of these thorns in your fingers, they will, first of all, it's going to hurt a lot. And even then, it's not like a regular thorn because of the oils inside of the Devil's Club. It's going to get infected regardless, even if you just get poked a little bit. If you get one of these thorns stuck in you, it's going to hurt really bad and it's going to get infected. Almost every time it'll get infected just because of the properties of the plant. So we want to be very careful, make sure we have some thick leather gloves so that we can handle them and it's not going to poke through those gloves. Because what we want, the medicine we're going to gather from this Kagumna Kasimagak is the second layer of the bark. So not the woody part inside, but the second layer. So we're not going to be really doing anything with these thorns. But I'm going to put on both my gloves. So for that, even after we've picked them fresh, we can usually take them, and I'm going to put them in here because I don't want these thorns just flying off anywhere, but I'm going to lightly brush off all of these thorns off of the Devil's Club, just so I can get them nice and clean, like I've got these ones. These ones I've already done, so I've brushed off all of the thorns off of there. So those I can probably handle without my gloves after I've gotten the thorns off. So all I do is I very lightly back and forth so the thorns aren't flying everywhere. Because like I said, if you're doing them in your yard or something, you don't want these flying on the ground and somebody coming along and stepping on them, because they will hurt a lot. And I'm just scraping it off. Scraping off those thorns so that I can collect the inner bark on it. So once I've gotten most of the thorns off and scrape those away, now when you're scraping them, you'll see these things, and you just pull those off and scrape around. Scrape all of those thorns off of those where the leaves were going to grow. Because again, like I said, you want all of these thorns off. Again, there, one of the old branches, I just grab it, rip it off, scrape around there. And sometimes some of those little thorns don't come off, so you can just cut those off carefully. And try and get as much of those thorns off as you can. Once you get near the end, it gets really soft. So again, there you want to just try and get as much as you can, and then just cut those outer thorns off so that you can continue handling them. Now with some, they do get a little drier, and sometimes when they're dry you could just use your glove and scrape them on there. But when you do that, it loses a lot of its medicinal value. So you want them when they're fresh and the inner bark is still green. So again, there we're just scraping off the thorns in preparation for collecting that inner bark, the second layer of bark. as with gathering any medicines, it does take time. It's not, most of the time it's not easy work. There is work that goes into it. But of course, if it was easy, everybody would be doing it. So again there, I just cut away some of the thorns that I couldn't scrape off. And since I've taken this plant from the bush, as with anything, if it's a plant or an animal, we want to make sure we take as much as we can without wasting, because even with this plant, it is giving its life to give medicines. So we're going to honor its sacrifice and honor it by using everything we can. So there, now I've gotten all the thorns off, and I'm just going to put those aside and then throw them in the fire pit later, just so nobody's going to be stepping on them and getting those thorns in them. So now what I do is I take another container and I'm going to scrape off or shave off this second layer of bark here, and you'll see it there. So it's not the easiest to scrape off, but you'll see the greenish stuff, that's where all the medicine is in this plant. And again with the devil's club, commonly used mainly to treat inflammation. So inflammation of the muscles or the bones. The Nihiawak, Cree peoples, mainly used it as medicine for arthritis or problems with the joints and bones, because it does have that ability to act as an anti-inflammatory when used topically. So if we use it outside our skin, it'll penetrate into the skin and take away any inflammation. And this has been used for generations for that type of thing. So I'm not trying not to take any of the woody material. I'm just scraping off as much of the green inner bark, because again, that's where the medicine is. And you could see how I'm scraping it away to get all of that bark with the medicinal value in there, with that anti-inflammatory property in there. And again, even with what I have left, once I do get all of the medicinal inner bark off of the woody center of the plant, I'll even use what's left here. So I'll just give you an example of how it looks. I'm just going to cut it. So with this, the woody inner woody part, once all the outer and inner bark is scraped away, often it was used as to make stuff like, if you've seen the bone beads, they'd make bone beads out of these because they do go really hard, and they tend not to shrivel up or anything like that. They just kind of maintain their shape, so they stay the same shape, and areas where it's nice and straight. And the thing about the devil's club is when it does dry, the very center is sort of spongy, so you can easily push something through to use them for stuff like beads. And often people would wear them, make necklaces or chokers out of them, because again with the devil's club, there was a belief that it had the ability to protect people from bad things or bad energies and stuff like that. So they would make necklaces and chokers out of them, and some would hang like the whole devil's club, a piece of it above their door, just to ward off any bad energies and stuff like that. today we're collecting this for medicine. Again, these I'm going to keep them because, like I said, we can use them later on to make beads or to make chokers and necklaces and stuff. But I'll continue scraping off all of this medicine, and then I'll show you what we're going to do once we're done that. Alright, so now we finished peeling off all of the inner bark from our devil's club, and we've got all of the green stuff off, all of that inner bark, and we get the nice clean inner woody part. Again, we're going to dry that, keep it, and for later use to make, like I said, chokers or necklaces or what have you. But we're going to keep that and use that as well. So this is all of the medicinal second layer of bark. So what we're going to do with this now is try to capture that medicinal property in there, because it's that anti-inflammatory medicine we want from this plant to help with treating arthritis, muscle aches, and those type of bone and muscle inflammation problems. And that's traditionally what we'd use it for. Now there's a lot of different ways to use it too as well for other treatments, but again, I'm only going to show you the most common treatment and the easiest treatment to make. So with this now, we have to make sure that we prepare it properly to try and get all of that medicinal value out of it. So what we're going to do is we're going to make an infusion, an oil infusion. So with an oil infusion, what's going to happen is I'm going to put this in my jar here, and then we're going to fill it with oil, and then we're going to let that sit for about a month, because during that month's time, all of the medicinal value inside of this devil's club is going to seep out into that oil and infuse that oil. So all the medicinal value will remain with the oil, and what's left is just this organic matter. The solid matter will be left, but all of the medicinal value will go into or soak up into the oil. And it's with that oil, once it's done, we'll make a cream or a salve out of it. And with making the cream or the salve, I'll show that a little later on, but like I said, we've got to infuse this first. And to make the salve, all we do is at the end of the infusion process, at the end of a month, once all of the medicine has seeped into the oil, we'll strain out all of the whatever is remaining, the solid matter, out of that oil, and then we'll heat that oil, and we slowly add unrefined beeswax. So it's pure beeswax right from the beehives, and we slowly add that solid beeswax into there until we get the consistency of sort of like a salve or a cream, and that's what we want to use for treatment outside the body. Now for me, I like to use, some people use stuff like olive oil, which is really common because it's a pure oil. I like to go as traditional as possible. So any infusions, I like to use bear grease, musquapimi, and with my bear grease or my bear oil, that's what I'm going to infuse, because those who use traditional medicines really like the bear grease, because bear grease has that ability to really penetrate. So once we have this medicine infused into the bear grease is really going to help open those pores and help that medicine to penetrate deep into the muscles, the bones, and the tissue, wherever that inflammation is. So I like to use bear grease. Now with the bear grease, we make sure we only use the clarified bear grease. And by clarified, I mean that you can see it's just pure, clear bear grease. And all of the proteins and fat solids have settled at the bottom. So anything above that line is what we call clarified oil. So it's like when you're making clarified butter or anything like that, you're just taking out the solids So all you have is the oil. So this is just the oil from the bear grease, and that's what I want for my infusion. So when I do pour this out, I'm going to pour very carefully, making sure none of this proteins or fats go into there, because this stuff can spoil, and this stuff will last for years and years without spoiling. But anything below there with the proteins, they spoil easily, so we want to make sure we're only using the clarified oil or the clarified bear grease. So how to infuse it? I'm just going to add as much of our Devil's Club as I can into our jar, and I want to save some because some I want to keep for other uses, but again I'm only going to be talking about making the salve, because it's common out there, and a lot of people, it's in high demand amongst elders, so it's good for a lot of people to learn how to make this, just to help elders with arthritis and muscle problems and inflammation, joint problems. So I'm going to keep some just for storage, but a lot of it I'm going to make into this infusion. Alright, so I've got about 1/4 of what I had left. I'm just going to dry for later use in other ways. But for this infusion, now I've added as much of my Devil's Club as I can. Now I'm going to slowly, carefully pour in my clarified oil. Careful not to pour in any of those proteins. And I'm just going to pour it on to my Devil's Club. And again, I can see the proteins starting to come to the top there, so I'll stop there. I'm going to just close that off and continue to pour in my clarified oil. And I want to make sure it's all covered in there. So again, I'll stop there. And now, since it's not all under the oil, I want it all in and under the oil, I'm just going to press it down. Now during the infusion process, with this oil, now I know you'd usually like to fill it right up, but that's all the clarified bear grease that I have, because I want to keep some for other use. So I'm going to put this in a dry, dark place in a cupboard, and I'm going to leave it for a month, and I'm going to seal it to let that infusion occur in there, because I don't want any of the air or anything escaping, because that's still some of the medicines in there. And every now and then, not that often, I'm just going to go and give it a shake in the cupboard, just to help that infusion process, settle it out, and let it continue infusing. And what will happen is, as it infuses, the oil will start to turn green because of the greenish root and bark that I've put in there. And that'll be what we want at the end of this process, is that infused oil. And it's already turning somewhat green in there. But like I said, I'm going to let that infuse for about a month. And after I've shaken it again, I just want to squish everything down so it's under the oil and infusing into there. But you don't need to do that often, because just how infusion works, oil infusion, is it's all of that plant chemicals are going to seep into the oil and mix in well with the oil. So again, I'll seal that, and I'm going to be putting that in a dark place for about a month before I move on to the next step.